Let's start with this video, and I hope people can see it on this interview and see it at revolver.news, where it is. We've just published it. And it's really remarkable. What it depicts is the discovery of the DNC bomb at approximately 1:05 p.m. on January 6th. And if you follow the timestamps closely, you can see this guy in a backpack come into frame at around 1:05. What he does is he first approaches a car, which is a Metro PD car, talks to the driver's side in the window for a while, then moves to the other side of the window, and then eventually moves and chats with somebody in a black SUV, which is a Secret Service car, chatting with Secret Service. In fact, we've learned through multiple sources that the Metro PD was part of that Secret Service detail. Why was the Secret Service there? We'll get to that in due course. But the guy finishes talking to the SUV and then leaves the frame. What the individual in the backpack is doing is alerting the Metro PD and the Secret Service of the fact that there is a pipe bomb just feet away that was planted by the park bench outside of the DNC. Now, for those watching this video, and everyone has to watch this video to follow along, the first thing that will strike you as remarkable is just how utterly unconcerned both the Metro PD and the Secret Service are about being informed that there was a pipe bomb literally within feet of them and within feet of their protectee, who was VP-elect Kamala Harris. You'll notice if you watch from approximately 1:07 to 1:09 in the timestamp, utterly lackadaisical, utterly unconcerned. Takes them minutes to even get out of their vehicles, at which point they're just kind of lingering around, uninterested, unconcerned. And then this alone is enough to be a national scandal and blow open this investigation with severity. And that is the Secret Service, the Metro PD. You'll see this. I couldn't believe it when I saw it. They allow a group of children cross the street in the direction of the pipe bomb and allow the children to walk within feet of the park benches where the pipe bomb was planted. The Secret Service agent as well is walking right with the children within feet of this bomb. Then, about a minute later, a Capitol Police officer walks even closer to the bomb, takes a picture of it, gives a thumbs up sign, leaves, after which point the Metro PD car, the Secret Service car leave, and then the video is over. Now, I know from very reputable sources who have seen the extended video that minutes after that, they have a bomb-safe robot come to dismantle and defuse this bomb. Now, people listening to this are probably asking themselves, first of all, why the unconcern from the Secret Service and the Metro PD? Unconcerned for themselves? Unconcerned for their protectee, Kamala Harris? Unconcerned for the children that they cavalierly allowed to walk within feet of this explosive device? And that concern juxtaposed and contrasted with the fact that they needed a bomb-safe robot to defuse this pipe bomb, this alleged pipe bomb. So those are the facts that are illustrated incontrovertibly in this video, and that I think as a self-contained analysis are sufficient to be a national scandal.
There was something about January 6th that didn't feel right, and hovering over that day has remained the question, to what extent was it a setup? And we still don't really know. But what's interesting is how few people have asked that entirely legitimate question. One of the very few, really one of the only in the United States Congress, is a member called Clay Higgins from Louisiana. And in case you haven't seen this clip, it's worth rewatching. This is from 2022 in a Homeland Security Committee hearing where he asked it just directly of the FBI director. Watch.
Did the FBI have confidential human sources embedded within the January 6th protesters on January 6th of 2021?
Well, Congressman, as I'm sure you can appreciate, I have to be very careful about what I can say about when
Even now, because that's what you told us 2 years ago.
May I finish? About when we do and do not, and where we have and have not used confidential human sources. But to the extent that there's a suggestion, for example, that the FBI's confidential human sources or FBI employees in some way instigated or orchestrated January 6th, that's categorically false.
Did you have confidential human sources dressed as Trump supporters inside the Capitol on January the 6th prior to the doors being open?
Again, I had to be very careful.
It should be a no. Can you not tell the American people, no, we did not have confidential human sources dressed as Trump supporters positioned inside the Capitol?
Gentleman's time has expired.
You should not read anything into my decision not to share information
Director Ray,
about confidential human
gentleman's time has expired.
What a sleazy, repulsive little authoritarian liar Chris Wray is. That's obvious when you watch that tape.
By federal law, Congress passed a law that requires me to go to the Sergeant Arms Capitol Police Board in advance of an event and to request federal resources such as the National Guard. So Congress passed a law. It's 2 U.S. Code 1970. Look it up. Just make sure you look it up before December 22 when they changed it. So what was in effect on the 6th? That requires me to go and get approval for bringing in National Guard or federal assistance in advance. I have to go to the Capitol Police Board and get approval from congressional leadership in advance, like I did on January 3rd. I'm denied twice because of optics and because the intelligence didn't support it. So think about that.
Let me ask you the question, who made that decision? Who denied you?
I was denied by Paul Irving, House Sergeant Arms, and also Mike Stenger, Senate Sergeant Arms.
And who do
on January 3rd.
Who do they work for?
It would have been working for Pelosi on the House side. That Pelosi was his number one boss, and then McConnell on the Senate side.
Ah.
So
effectively, Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi shut down your request.
My request was shut down, one, because of optics, which is interesting. You're going to hear that term come up a couple more times. Optics, or the look of the National Guard on the Hill. But yeah, in the Capitol Police Board, I mean, it's unbelievable that I'm the only chief of police in the United States that has a law preventing me, not just regulations, rules that say I got to go and get approval to bring in the National Guard, a law. So that's crazy that Congress is going to pass a law that controls what I can do to protect the Capitol, and even in emergencies. So think of this. Even while we're under attack, I have to go to those same two people to request the National Guard to be brought in. I have 340 National Guard that have been activated. At least 150 to 180 of those are in the city, many of them within eyesight of the Capitol, okay? We got to come under attack at 12:53. 12:55, I called the Washington, D.C. Police Department. I talked to their Assistant Chief, Jeff Carroll. Thank God I had talked to him at 10:59 in the morning and asked him if he could possibly put some additional resources on Constitution Avenue. And he had some CDU platoons up there. Called him, said, hey, please send those in right away, because we knew as soon as they came up to their west front, they started attacking, it was going to be bad. 12:58, I make my first call to the Sergeant Arms, asking, saying, hey, it's bad, we need assistance, I need a declaration of emergency, I need to bring in the military immediately and federal resources. I'm told by Paul Irving, quote, I'm going to run it up the chain, I'll get back to you.
The chain is Pelosi.
The chain his chain would be up to Nancy Pelosi. He didn't have to do that, but he wouldn't give me authorization. The law says in emergency he can grant me authorization, but he didn't. He said he'd run up the chain. My next call was over to Mike Stenger. He's now the chairman of the Capitol Police Board. Told him the same thing. We're getting our asses handed to us on the west front. I need federal resources. He said, what did Paul tell you? I said, he's run up the chain. He goes, let's wait to hear what we hear from Paul. Sorry. So for the next 71 minutes, I make 32 calls. I'm in the command center. I'm calling my partner agencies. And by law, one of the first people to offer assistance was the United States Secret Service. And by law, I shouldn't have requested their assistance. I shouldn't be until I had approval. But I'm looking at my men and women having their asses handed to them. And my first thought was, fuck it, I will take whatever discipline there is. Send me whatever you got. No, that's the one text Secret Service turned over. You know how they lost all their texts?
Yes.
It's the text between their Chief Sullivan and myself. Thank God for him.
But I don't. You make this call immediately to the House Sergeant Arms, who reports Mr. Irving, who reports to Nancy Pelosi. He says, "I'll call Pelosi."
He says, "I'm gonna run it up the chain."
Run it up the chain, but that is the chain.
No, I hear you. I got you. I want to tell you exactly what he said.
What happens then? Does he get back to you?
So for the next 71 minutes, I make the 32 calls to a number of agencies. 11 of those calls are follow-up calls. And look in the Senate combined report from 2001. They have a great infographic of the call after call after call after call. 11 times I call in the next 71 minutes going, where are we on the approval? Where are we on the approval? Just any minute now. Any minute. I'm going to get any minute. Finally at 2:09, 71 minutes later, 2:09, I'm finally given approval. Think about that. 71 minutes later, I immediately call Mike Stinger, say we've got approval. I was so pissed off, I made sure that the watch commander, I'm in the command center, I yelled to John Wisham, the lieutenant, that's my watch commander. I said, John, mark the time as 2:10. I finally got approval for the National Guard. I was that mad.
So what is I just want to pause on this for a minute. That's it's almost unbelievable. So this is an event that Pelosi herself has likened to Pearl Harbor and 9/11, the worst thing that's ever happened on American soil. And she's in charge of allowing the National Guard to come in and respond, but she doesn't for 71 minutes? What is that?
I can't fathom why. I mean, they had to have known what was going on. I was telling them how bad it was.
Well, it was on TV.
It was on TV. It was right outside of Mike Stinger's office. And they had a meeting in his office saying, hey, where's the National Guard? And they're like, oh, we're trying to make... The fighting is going on right outside his office. And I'm still getting delayed.
This is an unbelievable story.
Oh, it is. Now get a kick out of this.
Has anyone ever explained this?
It's verbatim in my book. I have details. The whole chapter on January 6th is almost 100 pages long.
But I don't understand. So we're only 10 minutes into this, and you've told me two things. One, the other federal agencies withheld critical information from you in charge of security at the Capitol before January 6th. And once it started and things got out of control, for 71 minutes, Pelosi refused to allow you to bring in the National Guard. So those are two of the biggest questions from January 6th. And my question is, why don't we have answers to why that happened?
It doesn't seem like people really want to get to the bottom of it. It really doesn't. And it just gets worse. It gets worse from there.
I'm sorry to step on your story. It's shocking.
It is. It is shocking to think that we should be a coordinated security apparatus. There's regulations. There's procedures for defense support for civil authorities. I've taught it for the military. They don't realize they brought me in to ask me to actually teach this for foreign governments coming to visit. There's a process for when law enforcement needs help and we dial 911. It's to the military. And that failed. That failed miserably because of the law Congress passed and the denial I was receiving.
Well, it sounds like it was prevented.
I've already had to lay out over $500,000 in legal fees for the lower court that found me guilty of this charge. But Tucker, the good news here is that this is just going to be, in my hope and judgment, a landmark constitutional case on the constitutional separation of powers and the use of executive privilege as a tool of sound presidential decision-making. The remarkable thing...
Wait, hold on. Wait. Peter, for 1 second. Yeah. First of all, I could not support you more vehemently. Yeah. I think you're being railroaded for political reasons. I think it's very obvious to any reasonable person watching this, whether that person voted for Trump or not, or likes you or not.
Yeah.
But I don't think we're at the stage of regime collapse where constitutional precedents maybe are the operative question. I think it's about force, and they're trying to put you in prison because they don't like you, and they want to send a message to others that if Trump gets elected, don't serve that administration. You'll wind up like Peter Navarro spending your 70s in jail. So my question to you is, and this has got to be obvious to you, if I think it's 57 or so days from now, they can put you in prison no matter what you say, whether it's appealed or not.
Yes.
If ordered to go to prison, why would you comply with that? Like, at a certain point, do you just say to yourself, this is all fake? It's not our system you're upholding, it's our system you're destroying, and I'm not going to participate in it.
No. I obeyed the law. I obeyed the law when I failed to respond to congressional subpoena because the law, Tucker, for more than 50 years across Democrat and Republican presidencies has been that senior White House officials like me, alter egos of the president, shall not and cannot and legally cannot be compelled to testify before Congress. And the reason is very simple, is because executive privilege is something that goes right back to George Washington, our first president, who understood that confidential communications within the White House are critical to effective decision making. That's something that the Supreme Court has long recognized, and that's something that the Pelosi Congress with the J6 committee trampled all over.
But
and
you're kind of making my point for me,
here,
though, aren't you? Wait, hold on. Aren't you making the point for me, which is everybody knows that. It's long established. Eric Holder, Attorney General, blew off a congressional subpoena from a real committee. This was January 6th, whatever that body was not a real committee. It was a cover-up operation that committed crimes, okay? So they didn't even have the moral authority to tell anybody to do anything. They should be charged. But their precedent was very, very clear. You're not the first White House official to say you can't subpoena me. So they knew that when they sentenced you to prison. So they don't care about the law. Only you care about the law. So isn't it kind of asymmetrical here?
Well, it's certainly asymmetrical. They have the power, and it's my firm belief, as is yours, that we live in a world where the justice system has indeed been weaponized. I mean, look, they want to put Donald Trump in prison. There's no question about that. I'm the appetizer, as it were, the chum in the water, and we do have an election going on. It's very important to get him elected. But look, this issue from a legal point of view is interesting, Tucker, because I literally am the first person ever in this republic to ever be actually charged. All the other people you mentioned never got charged, so there's no what they call settled law. I mean, the central legal question is whether people like me can be compelled to testify for Congress. The law is not settled on that. The law is not settled on questions like what's the burden of Congress to get the information it's seeking. They're not supposed to have investigations to punish people. They're supposed to seek information. And one of the remarkable things, Tucker, is that from the outset, I said, look, President has invoked executive privilege, which he undeniably did. It's not my privilege by law to waive, and I'm more than happy to comply with your subpoena if you just call the president and ask him to waive the privilege. You know what? Not one single phone call, either from the J6 people or the government itself. Instead, the government, this is your two-tier system. Instead of like calling me and saying, okay, we got an indictment, please peacefully surrender like they do with everybody else, they put me in leg irons. Leg irons.
Of course they did.
Tucker,
as they did to Roger Stone and a lot of other people that you worked with. And that's kind of my question.
Yes.
The whole world that you occupied in, say, 2019, which wasn't that long ago, everybody's been either indicted, sent to jail, did some kind of plea, has been unable to find a job, has been bankrupted by civil suits. Like, everybody's been destroyed.
Yes.
And no one on the left has been destroyed
Eastman,
at all. They've all
Clark,
thrived.
Scavino,
Have you noticed this?
Meadow, you name it.
Yeah, everybody.
I have indeed. I mean, it's, look, it is what it is. This is why we have to take back the reins of power, Tucker, and have, one of the big disappointments to me is the Republicans took over the Congress in 2022, and there hadn't been any attempt whatsoever to get to the bottom of J6 or to get to the bottom of why all of the Trump people and Trump himself are winding up being papered with indictments, subpoenas, drained dry of legal funds. I mean,
what do you conclude from that?
What do you conclude from the outset?
Of course. But what do you? I mean, what you said is indisputably true. So the Republicans take power, and they collaborate with the Democrats to turn this into a one-party state. So what does that tell you about them?
Well, the law. It tells me that they're amoral, the ends justify the means, and their Trump derangement syndrome really broke the Democrat Party apart once Trump got into office because they left everything behind. It's not, look, it's the Democrats themselves, it's a lot of the legacy media and the journalists who can't even cover my own story correctly. And what I make of that is we've really lost our moral compass in that this is a nation that's basically two nations. One it's the MAGA, Trump's America, Tucker's world where we believe in the rule of law. We'd like to believe in the rule of law. We believe that this country can be prosperous without massive government spending. We believe in secure borders. We don't like to send our men and women off to endless wars in places like Afghanistan and Iraq. And then we've got this other world where they're out for blood and they are using the reins of power. And this began not even the day Trump got inaugurated. See, that's the thing. My life experience, Tucker, in the White House, besides literally helping to create hundreds of thousands of manufacturing jobs and literally during the pandemic saving hundreds of thousands of lives. I mean, just think about that alone. That meant nothing to this court, okay? The other thing I observed was a relentless attack on Trump trying to overthrow a duly elected president. Pelosi, everybody, every Democrat on that J6 committee participated early on in multiple attempts to overthrow the Trump government, whether it was the Russia hoax, the impeachments, this, that, and the other thing. So what do I make of that? God bless Tucker for being on there and pointing this stuff out. Well, we've got work to do. And the only peaceful thing we can do here is make sure we get to the ballot box and change this Biden regime. I mean, and then maybe clean up the act here.
By the time it was actually J6 and you had masses of Americans assembled outside the Capitol, almost like 99.9%, 100% peaceful. On the inside, you had FBI assets dressed as Trump supporters that knew their way around the Capitol.
Before the doors even open.
Before the doors open. Or else how are you going to get around the Capitol? You've been there many times. You need a guide to get from whatever door you go in.
It's a labyrinth.
It's a maze inside there. So that's right. So there's no way, just Americans, most of which have never been to the Capitol, there's no way they can come in some random door that gets opened and then get their way directly to the statuary or the House chamber or the Senate chamber. It's just not possible. So the FBI assets that were dressed as Trump supporters that were inside the Capitol were there, I believe, and evidence indicates that they were there to specifically wave in the Trump supporters that had gathered outside the Capitol, and the doors open and they were allowed in. And on the inside were there's some more Trump supporters, but really those were FBI assets, law enforcement assets that knew their way around the Capitol. And they waved those guys in, said, come on, follow us. And they're the ones that led them on the path directly. How do you think a guy's never been to the Capitol, gonna come into the Capitol all amped up on emotion and make his way straight to Nancy Pelosi's office? Come on. It's like I couldn't get it. There's no way. I've been there for 7 years. Could come in some random door at the Capitol and make my way to Nancy
Everything
Pelosi.
is unmarked. I mean, those leadership offices are unmarked. So how would you know
It's
that?
confusing
That's
to get
right.
around in the Capitol. Every American that has been there knows this. When you go on a tour, you bring your family to D.C., you go through the Capitol, you have to have a guide. And on January 6th, the guides were FBI assets, the law enforcement assets, and they were dressed as Trump supporters. They were positioned inside the Capitol prior to the doors being open so that the Americans that had assembled outside the Capitol, once allowed in, could be brought directly to the areas where the FBI and the DOJ and the deep state actors knew would be the most sort of condemning criminal action of Americans being inside the Capitol, protesting without permit and things. They knew they were setting the stage for arrest and prosecution.
It's such a crime. Who planned this, do you think?
Well, I think factions planned this. I wouldn't say who, Tucker, because I don't think there was one person that planned this, but I believe the faction of establishment liberals within the FBI and the Democrat Party and our intelligence services to another extent use their massive powers of surveillance and investigative assets that they have across the country, confidential informants, registered informants, non-registered informants, voluntary informants. It's a complex web of FBI assets across the country that can be activated. So if you have authority at some of the highest levels in the FBI, it doesn't take much. The faction within the FBI and within our intelligence services that would coordinate with the most extreme liberal factions within the Democrat Party that were desperate to keep Trump out of office and worked within the theater of operations, shall we say, that had been set by the COVID alleged medical emergencies nationwide and millions of mail-in ballots. There's no daylight between the compromised election cycle of November 2020 and ultimately what happened on J6. So you ask who planned this? This would be the combination of several of the most extreme liberal, anti-Trump, anti-America First factions that were in positions of authority within our federal law enforcement organizations and the Democrat Party across the country.
When you say that there were FBI assets in the crowd, in the building beforehand and certainly outside, what's the scale of this? Are you talking like 10, 20?
No. Based upon some very conservative but like hard investigative effort, evaluation of the numbers, from putting together eyewitnesses and videos and affidavit statement and whistleblower statements and court records that have been revealed through individual criminal cases where J6 defendants have been prosecuted and smart attorneys have forced admissions by the DOJ and the FBI, but those admissions have been sealed within the parameter of that criminal case by protective order by the judge, so I can't share them, but I've seen them. So real hard, objective, and conservative estimates would put the number of FBI assets in the crowd, outside, and working inside at well over 200.
200?
Yeah.
So you're in law enforcement?
Yeah.
Before you came to Congress in the military as well? That's an extraordinary number. Is it?
Well, no. When you think about the scope of the operation, if you were going to do this, you would need that number.
But relative to, so like when, I don't know, Minneapolis burned down, or when St. John's, the Episcopal Church across from the White House in Lafayette Square, was set ablaze, and all those Secret Service agents were injured. Were there 200 FBI assets in the crowd among Antifa then?
I mean, I don't know how many undercover agents the FBI would have in a situation like that, but J6 was the final act prior to arrest and prosecution of Americans that were identified as Trump supporters. I mean, the objective was to destroy the entire MAGA movement, to forever stain the patriotic fervor that was associated with the America First mega movement that had won in 2016 and we believe won again in 2020. And the establishment on both sides, both major parties, were determined to smash that out of existence, not just by defeating Trump, but by destroying the reputations of the movement itself, by creating this narrative that was totally false, but was heavily pushed, that MAGA Republicans, America First Republicans, are somehow a danger to our republic and a domestic terror threat, which is a whole nother story about what the FBI has done to tagging Americans as suspected domestic terrorists and following us as we travel across the country. But the bottom line is that 200, I believe, is a conservative number. Personally, I think there's many more. But a number that I'm comfortable going on record with is that we believe that there were easily 200 FBI undercover assets operating in the crowd, outside the Capitol, embedded into groups that entered the Capitol or provoked entry of the Capitol, and working with FBI assets that would have included Metro Police and Capitol Police that would dress as Trump supporters inside the Capitol, because those were the guys that knew their way around the Capitol.
You knew, of course, that you were led into the chamber by law enforcement and that you prayed for them once you were inside. What was it like hearing people like Steve Schmidt call for your murder, knowing what you did about what actually happened?
Well, for me, given that I understand now especially that January 6th was a deep state setup and a deep state psyop that ensued afterward, I'm not surprised. That's what these people do. The whole media apparatus, what I call the mockingbird media, and the government are in lockstep.
But how frustrating was it? I mean, you may have been in prison when he went on Bill Maher and said that you should be shot to death for being led into the Senate chamber. But how frustrating was it to hear that he and so many other people saying the same thing on behalf of the government when you knew it was all a complete lie?
Well, to be perfectly honest with you, because I understand the depths of government corruption and the mockingbird media's corruption, it was par for the course. And I didn't take it personally because I knew that all they'd done is dehumanize me. But this is what the propaganda in the mockingbird media does, is they dehumanize people, they caricaturize people to fit their narrative. And that's PSYOP 101, Tucker.
Yeah, but these are human beings, and you're an American citizen and a veteran, and you did nothing wrong. So, I mean, you don't sound frustrated by it. Perhaps you've reached a Zen level of acceptance. I don't know. But it's a little shocking, isn't it?
Well, not when you understand what the deep state is and how they operate. So with that said, if you like, I'd like to bolster what it is that I said when I say that the January 6 events was a deep state setup and a deep state psyop by describing what the deep state is in about 2 minutes, if that's okay.
Well, I hope you will.
Okay. So the founding fathers described or characterized tyranny as the consolidation of all three branches of government into a centralized power: executive, legislative, and judicial. Now, when we talk about the deep state, what we're talking about is a tyrannical government. But the deep state is comprised of three aspects. Number one, the first aspect is the circumventing of the checks and balances portions of our three-branch government system. If you corrupt the checks and balances portions, you don't need to corrupt the whole system, just the checks and balances that keep the centralization of power from happening. Right. So this is done through blackmail, bribery, lobbying, etc. Now, the other aspect to the deep state, the second aspect, is the bureaucracy. Now, the bureaucracy is comprised of over 500 federal regulatory agencies that are charged with regulating commerce. Now, these bureaucratic agencies are in effect writing law by writing the regulations that tell us what we can buy, what we can sell, what is legal and what is illegal. So that's legislative. They also have their own regulation enforcement agents that enforce their regulations on the American people. So that's executive. And they have their own administrative courts that are outside of the federal court system. So that's judicial. So that's tyranny. And now the third aspect of the deep state is the international corporations and the international banking cartels that have either blackmailed our congressmen or bureaucrats into submission, or they, through bribery and lobbying, they have written the regulations for the bureaucracy to then enforce. So then in this sense, the international corporations and banking cartels are using the government's monopoly on the initiation of force to reinforce their monopolies over our resources, our labor, and our currency. And they are using the government's monopoly on the initiation of force to take our tax dollars, public money, and put it into the private hands of less than 1% of the population. Now, that being said, they use psyops to ensure that we're fighting amongst each other and we don't understand or agree upon how it is that this tyrannical government has taken over the country and is forcing our compliance.
Now, I'm sorry. I have to say,
said,
I was told you were crazy, and because you wore Viking horns, I thought maybe you were crazy, but I spent my life in Washington, and I don't know what you're going to say next, but what you just said is true. That is absolutely true. That's not crazy. By the way, you described it really well. I've seen it firsthand, and I'm just kind of amazed. I'm not being patronizing. I'm just being sincere. That's not crazy at all, what you just said.
Well, thank you. And no, what's crazy is trusting these bureaucrats and these congressmen, what I call the dinosaurs and the dinosaur circus of DC, trusting them to fix all the problems that they've created over the last several decades. That's crazy. Now, let's talk about January 6th in light of what the deep state is and how it was a deep state setup. So we have Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell stripping Chief Sund of his powers, his emergency powers to put the National Guard there.
That would be the head of the Capitol Police.
Yogananda Pittman. Yes, Chief Sund. You did the interview with him, which was beautiful, by the way, where he basically said that he was stripped of his emergency powers by Nancy Pelosi and Mitch McConnell because they changed the law before January 6th, just so conveniently. And then Yogananda Pittman, according to former Capitol Police Lieutenant Tarek Johnson, she didn't get any of the information that was being given to her from the FBI, the CIA, and the Pentagon to Chief Sund. So here we are. We have the checks and balances portions of our government corrupted, whether that be Nancy Pelosi, Mitch McConnell, or Yogananda Pittman, the intelligence officer in the Capitol. So that's the checks and balances, or that's also the bureaucracy. We have CIA, FBI, and the Pentagon not telling Chief Sund what they believed was going to happen on that day. So here it is, the weaponization of information, the non-use of information to ensure that something like January 6th could take place. And we both know there was federal agents in the crowd. We both know Antifa and BLM were instigating the crowd. We both know that Capitol Police were set up. We both know that Nancy Pelosi and Yogananda Pittman sat on their hands while the building was attacked, and Tarek Johnson was trying to evacuate the Senate and the House, and nothing happened. He actually evacuated the Senate because he didn't get the orders because he knew it was the right thing to do. And the whole reason Ashley Babbitt got shot was because Yogananda Pittman refused to acknowledge and evacuate the Senate. Evacuate the House of Representatives like Tarek Johnson evacuated the Senate. And so because there was people in the House of Representatives, the police officer used deadly force against Ashley Babbitt.
Once again, I want to stop you and say I'm looking for the crazy. I'm not hearing it at all. Did you, just to pause, and I don't want to interrupt your narrative for too long, but did you have these views when you showed up to protest the 2020 election on January 6th? I mean, did you understand how the government worked at that point?
Yes, very much so. Look, I wrote a book in 2017 called One Mind at a Time, A Deep State of Illusion by Jacob Angeli. And when I wrote that book, I had an understanding of the entirety of the deep state, how it relates to the education system, how it relates to like propaganda and what Edward Bernays was talking about, the father of propaganda, how it relates to the Mockingbird media and Operation Mockingbird, how it relates to things like secret societies and intelligence agencies and how they're essentially fused, how it relates to people like Jeffrey Epstein and blackmail, how that relates to things like deep underground military bases, the black budget, how that relates to the black market, how that relates to certain research being done in these deep underground military bases, the classifying of technology, and a step further, how it is that that relates to things like UFOs, UAPs, and certain things like, for example, interdimensional entities and stuff like that. As a shamanic practitioner, it is actually like my job to kind of know all of that stuff and understand how it all works.